Mr. Okafor, there are discrepancies in the vendor payment records for the last quarter. Your signature appears on several that do not match our records. You need to come with us.
They said he was honest. They said his reports were clean. They said in a building full of arrangements, Michael Okafor was the one man nobody could buy. That was what they said, until a Tuesday morning when two men were waiting at his desk, and the documents they carried had his name on them, his signature, his authorization, payments he swore he never approved, figures he swore he never touched. Now, the question is not whether the evidence exists. It does. The question is, who put it there and why? This is the story of a man who graduated with a second-class upper from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, who built his first office in Lagos traffic, hawking sachet water on a road that did not care about his certificate, who returned 900 naira to a stranger in a black SUV when keeping it would have cost no one anything, who answered every question from his character rather than from calculation, and who woke up one morning to find that someone had decided that a man that clean was too dangerous to be left standing. This is part 2, and before this story is over, you will know exactly who was right. Michael Okafor sat in that house for days after the suspension. Not raging, not plotting, just sitting. The house was the same house, the cream walls with the water stain marks, the ceiling fan turning slowly, the worn brown leather sofa, the small wooden center table, but something had shifted in the air. The same silence that once felt like waiting now felt like something heavier. Mama Okafor watched her son. She did not crowd him. She did not fill the silence with words that would not help. She just moved through the house the way she always had, quietly, steadily, like a woman who has learned that some storms have to be waited out, not talked through. But the neighborhood had opinions again. Did you hear? They suspended him from that company. Embezzlement, they are saying no. I knew it. I always said that boy was too quiet. Quiet people are dangerous. After all that water selling story, it was just a cover-up. Michael heard some of it. He said nothing, because there is a particular kind of pain that comes not from guilt, but from being accused of something you did not do and having no way to immediately prove it. It sits differently. It is heavier than shame. It is the weight of a truth that has not yet found its moment to speak. He had one conversation with his mother on the 4th night. Just one. He sat beside her on the sofa and said, "Mama, I need you to know that I did not do this." She looked at him. "I know, my son. I knew before you said it. Now stop talking about it and go and sleep." That was all. That was enough. Now, let us go back to the Adeyemi Group offices, because while Michael was sitting in that house, something was moving inside those walls that he knew nothing about. There were 3 of them, 3 people who had built this thing together. The first was a man named Benson, senior accounts manager. 11 years at Adeyemi Group. 11 years of quiet arrangements, 11 years of vendor kickbacks that nobody could prove because the paperwork was always just clean enough. Benson had watched Michael from the very first week, watched how he worked, watched how he filed, watched how he corrected the payment file that had already been signed in Michael's name. That correction was the moment Benson knew Michael had to go. Not because Michael suspected anything, but because a man that honest in an accounts department is a lit candle in a room full of secrets. It is only a matter of time. The second was a man named Rotimi, vendor liaison officer. The one who managed the relationships with the suppliers whose invoices were being inflated. Rotimi's arrangement with Benson was simple. Rotimi approved the inflated invoices. Benson signed off on the payments. They split the difference. Clean, consistent, invisible. Until Michael started landing on the same files. The third was Kemi Adisa, 28 years old, junior accounts officer. She had been at Adeyemi Group for 3 years. She was not the ringleader. She was not even fully aware of the depth of what Benson and Rotimi were running. But she knew enough. Benson had come to her 2 months before the suspension, sat across from her desk, smiled the way powerful men smile when they want someone smaller than them, and told her that Michael Okafor was a problem. All I need from you is access to his filing system for 1 afternoon. That is all. Nobody will know, and your career here will be very secure. Kemi had hesitated, but she had looked at Benson's position, and she had looked at her own, and she made a calculation that she would spend a very long time regretting. She gave him the access.
Now, it must be said, Kemi had never been warm toward Michael. From the day he resumed, she had kept her distance. Not hostile exactly, just cold. Michael had noticed. Of course he had noticed. He was not oblivious. He simply chose not to make it an issue. He greeted her every morning. She responded minimally. He offered to help with files when the office was overwhelmed. She declined. He noted it, filed it, and continued being Michael. After the suspension, Kemi went back to her desk, back to her files, back to her routines. But something had changed in the quality of her silence. She had expected to feel relief. The threat to Benson's arrangements had been neutralized. Michael was gone. Everything could return to what it was before. But instead, she felt something sitting in her chest that she could not name. It was not guilt exactly, not yet. It was more like a splinter, small, barely noticeable, but always there, always pressing. She pushed it down, went back to work, told herself it was just the adjustment, that it would pass.
3 weeks after the suspension, on a Thursday afternoon, Kemi Adisa boarded a BRT bus headed toward Ojota terminal on her way home from work. The bus was already filling up fast. She found a seat near the front, dropped her bag on her lap, put her earphones in. She did not know that at the next stop, her mother would board that same bus. Lagos is a city of millions. The chances of 2 people who know each other finding themselves on the same bus on the same afternoon are the kind of odds that only God arranges. Her mother boarded at the next stop. An older woman, late 60s, round face, wearing a dark purple Ankara blouse and black skirt, a small black handbag on her lap. She made her way toward the back of the bus. She did not see her daughter seated at the front. Kemi did not see her mother moving toward the back. The bus was full, loud, moving. 15 minutes into the journey, the older woman at the back suddenly slumped sideways. It happened without warning. One moment she was sitting upright. The next, she was leaning against the window and then sliding. "Madam, madam!" The passenger beside her grabbed her. "This woman don't faint, oh!" The bus erupted. People standing up, craning their necks, the commotion rolling from the back of the bus toward the front. Kemi heard it. She stood, pulled out one earphone, looked back toward the commotion.
The aisle was blocked by standing passengers. All she could see was confusion at the back. And in the middle of that confusion, the bus began to pull over and people started pushing toward the doors, and she moved with the crowd. The bus stopped. The operators made their decision quickly. The unconscious woman was lifted out and placed on the grass verge at the side of the road. Her small black handbag placed beside her. The conductor tried her phone. It was locked. "We don't try. If we carry am go hospital, now who go pay? Make we dey go." And just like that, the conductor was calling everyone back onto the bus. People reboarded, including Kemi. She found her seat again,
put her earphone back in. The bus moved, but not quietly. Almost immediately, an argument broke out among the passengers. What kind of nonsense is that? You just dumped a human being by the roadside? Now so Lagos be, we no be a family. That is somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother. If we carry am go hospital, now who go pay? You go pay? The argument went back and forth all the way to the next stop. Kemi sat with her earphones in, eyes forward, saying nothing.
One person did not reboard the bus. One person stayed behind on that roadside when everyone else had moved on. Michael Okafor had been sitting somewhere in the middle of the bus. He had heard the commotion. He had watched the woman being carried out. He had watched people reboard, and his feet had not moved toward the door. Not because he knew who she was. He did not know. He simply could not leave. He crouched beside her, checked her pulse, stood up, stepped into the road, and began flagging down taxis with both arms. The first two drove past. The third slowed. Hospital. Emergency. I will pay whatever you ask. Just move. He lifted her carefully with the help of the taxi driver, got her into the back seat, climbed in beside her to hold her steady. It was only inside the taxi, under the better light, as he steadied her head, that he saw her face properly. He looked at her for a moment longer, something tugging at his memory. And then it landed. This woman, this face. He had seen her before, at the office, twice, maybe 3 times, waiting at reception to be signed in. Kemi's visitor, Kemi's mother. Michael sat very still in the back of that taxi for exactly 3 seconds. He thought about Kemi, about how cold she had always been toward him, how she never returned a full greeting, how she declined every offer of help. He did not know why. He simply noted it and continued being Michael. And now here was her mother, unconscious, in the back of a taxi, with his hand steadying her head. 3 seconds. Then he leaned forward and said to the driver, "Please, drive faster."
He spent the rest of that evening at the hospital. He spoke to the doctors. He was told it was a cardiac episode, that she needed admission, that there would be costs. He called his younger cousin, asked for a loan, did not explain why. His cousin sent what he could. Michael added what he had and walked to the billing desk. He paid every naira without hesitation. When the hospital asked for a next of kin contact before they could proceed fully, the woman's phone was still locked. There was nobody else. Michael picked up the pen and wrote his own name on the next of kin line, Michael Okafor, with his phone number beside it. Then he sat outside her ward until the doctor said she was stable. He left late that night. He did not announce himself. He did not make it into anything bigger than what it was. He just went home. And he came back the next day and the day after that. He would arrive, check with the nurses, sit for a short while, and leave before visiting hours ended, quietly, the way Michael did everything. On the 3rd day, the woman had recovered enough to speak. She asked the nurses about the young man who had brought her in. They told her he had been coming every day, that he had paid for everything, that his name was on the admission form as next of kin. She asked to see the form. They brought it to her. She looked at the name, Michael Okafor. She held the paper for a long time. Then she asked the nurses to please find a way to reach her daughter. Her daughter's number was written in a small notebook at the bottom of her handbag. My daughter, Kemi. The hospital called the number. Kemi picked up on the 2nd ring. The nurse told her her mother was in hospital, that she had collapsed on a BRT bus headed toward Ojota terminal, that a young man had brought her in, paid everything, had been coming back every day. Kemi arrived the following morning. She sat beside her mother's bed, held her hand, did not speak for a long time.
Then her mother told her everything. The bus, the darkness that came suddenly, waking up in the hospital, and the young man who had not left her by the side of the road. Kemi listened quietly. Then the nurse came in with a copy of the admission form. He filled this in when he brought her for next of kin. He has just left actually, maybe 40 minutes ago. He comes every day. Kemi took the form, looked at the next of kin line, read the name, Michael Okafor. She went very still. Something moved in her chest. She looked at the name again. Then she turned to her mother. "Mama, which bus was it? Which route?" Her mother said, "The BRT, the one going to Ojota." Kemi set the form down slowly. She had been on that bus. She had heard the commotion. She had stood up and looked back. She had seen a young man crouching over a woman on the floor. She had looked for 1 second and looked away and reboarded. The young man she saw crouching over the woman on the floor was Michael Okafor, and the woman on the floor was her mother. She had been on the same bus. She had seen him. She had looked away, and the man whose career she had helped destroy had stayed behind, had paid everything, had come back every day, and had written his own name on the form so her mother would not be alone. Kemi sat in that hospital chair for a very long time. She did not cry in front of her mother. She held it together until she stepped outside the ward, and then she stood in the corridor and she could not move. She spent the next 3 days in a war with herself that nobody could see from the outside. She went to work, filed her reports, ate her lunch, responded to emails. And all the time that splinter in her chest that had been there since the day Michael was suspended was no longer small. It had become something she could not breathe around. On the 4th day after visiting her mother, Kemi Adisa walked past her own desk, past Benson's office, past Rotimi's corridor, and knocked on the door of the 3rd floor, Chief Festus Adeyemi's office. "Sir, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that I understand what this will cost me." Chief Adeyemi looked at her for a long moment. Then he gestured to the chair across his desk. "Sit down." She sat, and she told him everything. She told him about Benson, about Rotimi, about the afternoon she gave access to Michael's filing system, about the documents that were altered, about the signatures that were forged. She did not minimize her role. She did not blame the pressure. She did not ask for anything in return for the confession. When she finished, Chief Adeyemi was silent for a very long time. Then he asked one question. "Why now? Why are you telling me this now?" Kemi looked at her hands. "Because the man you suspended saved my mother's life. He found her collapsed on the side of the road after everyone else had walked away. He paid her hospital bills. He came back every day to check on her. He wrote his own name as next of kin so she would not be alone. And I was on that bus. I saw him crouching over her. I looked away. I reboarded. I left. And he stayed. I cannot sit at that desk one more day knowing what we did to him." Another silence. Chief Adeyemi picked up his phone. He made 2 calls. The first to his head of security. The second to his lawyer. "Get me everything on the vendor payment files for the last 18 months. And find Benson and Rotimi. Tell them to come to my office, now." Before Kemi stood to leave, Chief Adeyemi looked at her one final time. "Your resignation is noted. What you did at the end does not undo what you did before, but it required courage. I hope you carry both lessons for the rest of your life. Legal review will determine what happens next." She nodded and left. What happened in that building over the next 48 hours was swift and without theater. Benson and Rotimi were confronted with Kemi's testimony and the forensic evidence that the investigation now knew exactly where to look. They had no credible answer. Their dismissal letters were on Chief Adeyemi's desk by the end of that day. Security escorted them from the building. their access cards deactivated before they reached the car park. The matter was referred to the relevant authorities. Their names and what they had done did not stay quiet within the industry. Doors that had been opened to them began to close, one by one, without announcement. They had spent years building arrangements. It took 48 hours for those arrangements to become the evidence that finished them.
Chief Adeyemi called a full staff meeting the following Monday morning. Every department, every floor, the lobby and the conference room both occupied. He stood at the front. No notes, no prepared speech. I want to address something that happened in this company. A member of our staff was suspended based on evidence that has since been proven to be fabricated. That member of staff conducted himself with integrity from his first day in this building. The failure was not his. The failure was ours, mine included. I committed to due process and I stand by that commitment. But due process requires the truth to surface, and the truth has now surfaced. I want every person in this building to understand something. This company will not be a place where integrity is punished and arrangements are protected. Not while I am sitting on that floor. He paused, looked around the room. Mr. Michael Okafor will be returning to this building. Effective immediately, he is appointed Senior Accounts Manager. His office will be ready by the time he arrives. He said nothing more, walked back to the elevator. The lobby was completely silent behind him.
Michael received the call at home that same morning. He was sitting on the sofa. His mother was in the kitchen. The ceiling fan was turning. He listened to everything the HR manager said. He asked 2 questions. When do I resume? Monday. Thank you. He ended the call, sat for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen doorway. His mother was at the stove, stirring, the long wooden cooking spoon moving in slow circles. Mama? She turned, looked at his face, read it the way only she could. She set down the spoon, wiped her hands on her wrapper, and without a word walked to her son and held him. Not crying, not speaking, just holding. The way a mother holds a child who has just come through something that she prayed him through from the other side. Michael did not cry either. He just stood there in his mother's arms, in that small kitchen with the kerosene stove and the bare bulb and the light green walls, and let himself be held. He resumed the following Monday. Crisp white long-sleeved shirt, plain black trousers, his best shoes. He walked through the glass entrance doors, past the reception desk. The secretary looked up. This time, her expression carried no assessment, just a nod.
Good morning, Mr. Okafor. 3rd floor. He took the elevator, stepped out onto the 3rd floor, walked down the corridor, stopped at a door. A nameplate had been placed on the door that morning. 4 words, Michael Okafor, Senior Accounts Manager. He stood in front of it for a moment, not smiling, not performing anything, just reading his own name on a door that someone had tried very hard to make sure he would never stand in front of. He opened the door, sat down at the desk, turned on the computer, and went to work. 3 days after Michael resumed, there was a knock on that door. He looked up. 2 women stood in the doorway. The first was older, late 60s, round face, dark purple Ankara blouse, small black handbag on her arm. The second was younger, late 20s, corporate blazer, eyes that had clearly not been sleeping well. Michael looked at them. He recognized both faces. He said nothing, just stood. The older woman spoke first. My son, I am the woman from the bus. I came to say thank you, with everything in thank you. Michael nodded once, quietly. You are welcome, Ma. Then Kemi stepped forward. She did not look away from his face. Michael, I owe you more than a thank you. I was part of what happened to you. I am sorry. I am deeply sorry. Michael looked at her for a long moment, Then he said, "I forgive you." Kemi blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that." A silence settled in the room. Then Kemi asked, "Why did you do it? You didn't know her. You had every reason to just keep walking. This is Lagos. Nobody stops." Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because she needed help, and I was there. In Lagos or anywhere else, that has always been enough reason for me." Kemi stood there for a moment longer. Then she nodded, collected her bag, helped her mother to the door, and left. Michael watched them go. Then he turned back to his desk, picked up his pen, and went back to work. My people, this is the story of a man who was mocked on the road, accused in the office, suspended without cause, and still could not walk past a woman lying by the roadside. The water he sold introduced him to his destiny. The 900 naira he returned opened the door, and the woman he helped on the side of the road unlocked the room behind that door. Guard your integrity, not because someone is watching, but because of who you are when no one is. God sees everything, even in Lagos, even at the side of a BRT bus stop, when everyone else has already moved on. This has been Life Stories with the Innocent. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you in the next story.